Good afternoon. My name is Joe Vio, and I've been asked by our CCN group out of St. Cloud to go over some of the Minnesota new accountability system, and some of the things that I've shared with our staff with regards to what the MMR and what the FR are and some of their meanings. So the agenda is going to be about 3 or 4 parts here, so that we're going to go over and define some of the major components of the MMR and the EFR, look at our scores and see how they kind of compare in some of the state categories. Once again, I'm at Delano Public Schools, so we're going to take a look at some of those scores. And again, this is what I was explaining to our staff to keep them informed. As you are probably aware, the initial designation data came out last spring, and we've had over the summer now the release of the new 2012 data, which is certainly now available. Some of the data sharing later on is that initial data to begin with. So, beginning with the MMR, that's the multiple measures rating system. It consists of 4 parts. Most of us are probably familiar with that: the proficiency, student growth, the achievement gap, and the graduation rate if you're a high school. Each of those domains is going to be worth 25 points, making the elementaries have 75 points possible and the high schools have 100 points possible. And they're going to divide that out and give us a percentage score. And they're going to combine the math and the reading and just give one score for each of the for the multiple measurement rating system. So once again, it's on those 4 components. The way that they rank them and the way that they get to the 25 points is after they do all the calculations within each of those categories, they rank the schools from highest to lowest and give it a percentile rank, and then use that number, that percentile number, to multiply by 25, giving each category 25 points possible. The proficiency score is exactly the same as our AYP model from the years gone by. So schools earn points based on the weighting of subgroups and etc. etc. So, but it's by and large it's exactly the same as the AYP calculations. The difference is that there's no safe harbor, and there's for this type of a system. The growth component and the achievement gap were probably 2 of the largest questions as far as how they're doing that. So if we take just a couple seconds here to look at the growth, we're going to look at the intent here is to try and look at measuring growth for each student based on a predicted growth score, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of seconds. The predictions are generated by how well students did from one year to the next based on their M scores. And probably the easiest way to show it is to look at it a little bit more in terms of a picture. So let's say that we're a student as a 7th grader and we have a 52, and it doesn't matter the math or the reading test, it would all be the same. So I have a score of 752 as a 7th grader. Well, what the state of Minnesota is doing then, they're taking all students across the state who score a 752 and moving them forward to their 8th grade year, and then they're averaging together what those students at 752 did in their 8th grade year. So as it turns out, for our initial rating, all students across the state who had a 752 in 7th grade averaged an 847 on their 8th grade test. Okay, and they had a standard deviation. So that would be the expected score for that student and any student who had a 752. So let's say that we had a student score a 755. Obviously that was better than their 752, and it was well above their score, their predicted score of a 747. So the question is how much better? So they're going to use that information to calculate this z-score. So in other words, they had a 755, take away the expected value, gives a total of 8, and divide it by that standard deviation, yielding a z-score of 1.10. In other words, they're 1 standard deviation above what the expected growth for that student would be. So that's a very, very good score. Then they're going to take every number, every z-score for every student in your school, add them all up and average them together to come up with a number for your school. Once again, put that in terms of ranking across the state, give you your percentile, multiply by 25, and that's where the score comes from. The achievement gap is attempting to close or narrow the gap between students who are of non-color to white students compared to all the other students of lower performing subgroups. For our school this last year, we were looking at a free and reduced and a special ed population. Those are the only two subgroups that counted. In other schools, that would be your students of color, your English language learner students, and so on, and all those different subcats. So the way that they're doing this is they are taking and subtracting your school's growth scores from the statewide averages. So they're going to be comparing your special ed student population with all the non-special ed student population from across the state. So they're using a much larger pool rather than what's in your school. And now, since it's a achievement gap, right, the smaller number, right, the closer to zero you would have, the smaller the gap. Meaning that if you had a negative score, that would be a very good score because your special populations did better than the statewide averages. So a negative score would definitely success. And once again, then they're going to rank them across the state, give it a percentile, and give it a score, multiply it by 25. As well as the graduation rate. Again, same sort of a scenario. Then when you have numbers in each of those 3 or 4 categories, you add them up, divide by the 75 or the 100 of your school, that designation score, that MMR score. All right, so once again, these are combining the math and the language arts or the reading scores at each of the schools to give you one MMR number. So the focus rating. The focus rating will only take into consideration 2 categories. Again, each will be worth 25 points. So, and what does that mean? Well, the focus rating or the focus proficiency, we're going to measure 2 different things. We're going to look at proficiency and how each of those focus groups or the special populations that we were talking about earlier measure up for their proficiency. And then also, again, we're going to use that in terms of the achievement gap. So it's the same achievement gap score as was used in the MMR. And again, those are worth 25 points. So the focus proficiency, once again, we're going to weight that. All of the subgroups will be weighted. So if you have, let's say, a special ed population of 100 students and a free and reduced population of 30 students, your special ed population is not going to be discounted since it's so much larger. So there is a weighting of subgroups for that. And the achievement gap, once again, is the same as previously. So again, you're going to get a percentage based on those 2 and dividing by D. And the accountability system also has to have labels. So again, these are completely for Title I schools. The reward schools are listed based on your your MMR, and they're the top 15% of schools. The priority schools are again MMR, the bottom 5% of the schools. And the focus schools are the 10% with the largest achievement gap, based on your frequency, on your focus rating. So the state of Minnesota felt that a fault of AYP was that it was strictly punitive, so they wanted to broaden that out a little bit. So they were looking to include other schools who were deemed being successful, and so they're going to call them celebration schools. And if you are in the top 25% of the schools across the state, you can apply to have that. Once again, provided that you're a Title I school. And schools who are in the bottom 25%, if they're a Title I school, they get a label in U.S. improvement. So this is a kind of a graph how that worked from the State Department. Again, the reward schools and the celebration schools are the top 25% of schools. The bottom 25% are continuous improvement and priority, and your focus rating gives you your focus schools identification. Once you have a label, how the heck are you going to get out? Well, you're going to take and look to be 2 consecutive years out of the bottom 25%, and then you can lose that rating. The focus schools, same thing. You'll be out of the bottom 25% for the FR. And schools of school improvement grant schools, if you're out of the bottom 25%, then you can lose that designation at the end of this coming up school year. And if you become a reward school, you can lose all your priority or focus school rating as long as you become a reward school. So how did we measure up? Again, I just took and looked at trying to figure out a visual way to see how we compared. So our MMR and our FR scores are on either side. In order to be a reward school, we needed a 73.3, and we were just shy of that at the elementary, and we were well above the designation for focus schools. The middle school, once again, was just shy of being able to be labeled as a reward school. Even though they're not a Title I school, they wouldn't be able to be given that label, which was highlighted here for our school at the high school. We were certainly within the top 15% of the Title I schools. However, since we are not a Title I school, even though we're in that category, we certainly we cannot get the label because we're not a Title I school. So the purpose of this was just to kind of show our school how those rating systems could possibly, or how they would be working. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Hopefully it didn't last too terribly long. I thank you for your patience, and hopefully it was well worth your time. Thanks once again.